Okay, now that our rig for the curves is done, we need to find a way of attaching this rig onto our character's waist. So what we're going to do is create another rig on the character that we're going to attach this one onto. And it's going to be a simple rig, at least conceptually. And it's going to be mainly consisting of some of these little attachment rigs that we've been using. These guys, you know, an attachment point on the mesh with an up vector and direction target. So we're going to create 8 of those going around the waist of the character, and then we're going to attach our different control points on the curves to those rigs. So let's get started. I'm going to create a locator down here, and let's bring it up and bring it into our I forgot to open the group where we have our gear accessories belt. There it is. So we have the belt controls in both belt curves. So let's bring up our locator over here. Pardon me. And I'm actually going to create a new group locator. Let's do a group locator and bring it in here. I'm going to call this one a group. Hold on a second. My keyboard was using a different language. Waist attach rig. We'll call it that way. I'm going to put the locator in there. So this is going to be like just, I'm using it as a parent. I could have used a regular locator, but just to simplify things, I don't need to sit this guy in the display in the scene. So I'm using a group locator instead. And let's match him to our locator here at the center. So now he's right there. And we have our other locator that came along for the ride because he was already parented, and it's in there. So I'm sorry. I'm going to create, we're going to need 24 locators for this exercise, because we need to create 8 rigs, and each rig consists of 3 locators. Of course, I'm not going to do all of them with you. We're going to do one, and then you can do the rest on your own. Actually, a couple, because there's a couple of ways of doing this, so I'm going to show you both. So let's duplicate as many locators as we need. We said 24. There we go. So we're going to take the first one, and actually before, let's take the first 8 ones, and these sorry, are going to be the ones we're going to attach. So let's make them a lot smaller. Then we need another 8 that are going to be the direction targets. So let's turn those into small boxes. And then we'll need the rest to be the up vectors. So these are going to be our now traditional pyramids. And I'm gonna point them up on Y, just because. So let's start with the first one. So the whole idea is that the rig needs to be as close as possible to each rider as we can, but it's going to be attached to the mesh. So it's going to lie directly on the mesh, but we want to have more or less the same height so that each one of these riders is as close as we can to its corresponding locator on the mesh. So for example, let's start with this one right here on the front of the character. Actually, let's find rider 1. It's on the back, so let's start on the back of the character. That's fine. And I'm going to use this edge right here to attach my locator to. So let's see which edge numbers we are dealing with. And again, I'm going to write these guys down. And it's 2242 for the first vertex and 2254 for the second one. Okay, so let's go back to our first locator. And we're going to add a edge position constraint to it. And let's enter those vertex numbers. It's 2242 to 2254. And there it is. So as you can see, it's a little bit high. Actually, I'm just going to make sure, yeah. I just turned off the subdivision surface for the mesh just to make sure the locator was on the right edge and I hadn't made any mistakes. So what I want to do is bring it down a little bit. So we can use these offsets on the constraint to do that. So let's do an offset on Y to bring it down. And we're going to do one on the Z-axis to bring it out a bit. So there it is. Okay. Sorry. So now we need to give it its constraint and its up vector, its direction and the up vector. So let's go to, I'm going to rename all these guys later on. So let's go to this guy and we're going to do the same edge position and we're going to enter the same numbers, 2242 and 2254, except this time we're going to set this to 0%, so it goes up there. And lastly, we're going to use this other edge for our other friend, which is edge 2315 and 2343. So let's take our first up vector and 2315, 2343. There we go. And again, let's bring this guy down. Actually, I forgot we were dealing with an edge constraint. So instead of using the offsets, I should have used the edge percentage. So let's do that. There he is. And let's reset this to 0. There you go. That's better. The offsets are useful when you're dealing with polygon position constraints, which we're going to do in a second. But for now, this is all we need. So now we need to take this guy and set the direction constraint over to this friend over here. And on the z-axis is fine. We don't care. And then shift select the up vector and assign it. And there we are. We have our locked locator right here on the mesh. Okay, so we've done one. I'm going to do a second one with you because this time we're going to use the polygon position constraints. So let's find who is a writer 2 is this guy right here. So we need something that is as close as possible to this guy. So I'm going to choose this polygon right there to attach to. So let's see who that is. 2256. Okay. 2256. So we're going to take our first locator. Well, in this case, the second one. And this time we're going to use a polygon position constraint. We're going to give it that polygon. 2256. Sorry. And when you use polygon constraints, the constraint object is going to move directly to the center of the polygon you have specified. And there's no way to move him using the edge percentage. And there's also no way to move him interactively. So in this case, yes, you do need to use the offsets. So that's what we're going to do. So let's move him on Y, more or less close to the height of the rider. And I think that's it. You don't have to be extremely precise. You just want to get close. And that's it. Now we need to give him his direction target and then his up vector. So the direction target, I am going to place it on this edge right here, which is 2275 and 2282. So let's go grab our second locator over here, the mesh, and we use an edge position constraint, and we give him the vertex numbers we wrote down: 2275, 2282. There we go. And now we can adjust this over to I think 50%. It's where it needs to be. And the up vector is going to be on this edge right here. And in this case, this one is 2275 and 2340. So let's use that. This guy, edge position 2275 and 2340. There it is. And we need to bring him lower, so he is close to our locator right here. So now that that's done, we can just go ahead, take this guy, assign its direction constraint over there, and then shift select our friend here and assign us an up vector. And we're set. Okay, so since you already know how this works, I'm going to let you go and I'm going to do the rest of the setup for the waist of the character, and I'll be right back in a second. Okay, I'm done. As you can see, there's all of our little rigs there surrounding the waist of the character, and they're moving with the mesh. So all is good. Now we need to find a way to attach our belts over to our belt rig over to this rig. And right now what we have are these controls, which actually deform the curves, but I cannot attach these directly because then I will lose the ability to be able to deform the belt manually. So what we need to do is create a parent object for all these guys that I'm going to use to attach to the rig. So that way the parent object for each control will follow the waist of the character, but I still have the controls to deform the belt manually. So let's take care of that. And all this I need to do in setup mode, because otherwise I may run into some channel problems later. So I'm going to start off by creating a locator, and I'm going to bring it up to the parent belt controls, and let's reset that out. Perfect. So now what I'm going to do is first, let's make this smaller. There you go. And now I'm going to match it to each control, starting with this one right here. So let's create 8 of these. And let's match each one of them to its respective control. So this one goes here. This one goes here. This one here. This one right there. 5th, the 6th, the 7th, the last one. Okay, now they are in position. Great. So what we need to do now is to parent these guys to their respective locator. So first, let's get out of setup mode. Let's make sure there are no jumps on position on anything here. So that's okay. So far, so good. So now I'm going to take the first control, sorry, parent it under the first locator, and I'm going to do the same with all the other ones. All right. So let's see what that gets us. If we go out of setup mode. Perfect. So, sorry. Now I have this parent object, which is going to be moved by the character itself, and I still have my control that is going to be moved by me manually. Now all I need to do is to take all the controls, and we need to zero them out because their parents have changed. Now they're zeroed, so that's great. And now all we need to do is parent each locator here, each parent of these guys, to the respective locator on the character, which is this guy right here, the ones attached to the mesh. So we're going to do that. Well, we're not parenting them, we are dynamically parenting them. So this guy to this guy, and we take this guy to this guy. Let's make sure we're always selecting the correct one here in the items list. Then this guy, because you got to be careful because the riders look exactly the same. You don't want to dynamically parent onto a rider. Actually, I don't even think Modo will let you. You'd probably run into a dependency loop. This guy to this guy right there. How many do we have left? 2 more. To this guy, yeah. And lastly, this guy onto this guy. Perfect. So now all of them are dynamically parented. Let's get out of setup mode. Excuse me. But as you can see now, our little belt rig is following the character's movements nicely. So all that's left is to do the Deformations Rig for the belt. So let's get started on that right away. And one thing I'm going to do is, I'm going to rename these guys later. I'm going to hide the Deformation Skeleton because that's distracting me. I don't need to see that right now. So again, we're going to start off by creating a locator. Let's bring that up to our belts rig here, and we're going to call it this one is going to be the parent actually. Sorry. So this is going to be the parent for our Deformers rig fold for the belt. Belt rig deform, yeah. So let's match him over to this locator we have right there at the center, and I'm going to change its display to a sphere, which is what I usually use for deformation items. Okay, now let's duplicate that, and we're gonna call this guy Deformer, Deformation Rig, parent it under our parent, and duplicate him several times. Again, I'll take care of renaming these guys later. So let's take this guy over here, and we're gonna match each one of these guys this time to the riders, because those are the ones that are actually going to be deforming the belt. They determine how it deforms. Okay, so we're gonna match these guys over to each rider. So the first one goes here on this guy on the back. Hold on a second. There you go. Yeah. And then the second one goes on to this locator over here, and the third one goes on to this locator over here, and the fourth one to this one, the fifth one to this one right there, the sixth one onto this guy, the seventh one onto him, and the eighth one onto this guy. Perfect. I'm gonna take these guys and make them smaller because they're way too big. Something like that will be okay. And lastly, well, there's two ways to get the belt to deform using our deformers here. And the first one would be I could add all my influences manually using these guys as the effectors, and affect the mesh using weight maps and paint it all myself, which is of course doable, but it's a little bit of extra work. And the other one is to use the binding tool. And the thing with the tool is the way we've used it before, that requires a hierarchy. And in this hierarchy, the last element of the hierarchy, the bottommost children of it, would not influence the mesh in any way because they get not any weights assigned. So it means we would have to, of course, create a children for each one of these locators, and have that be their children, so they would actually influence the mesh. But there's also another way of doing the binding that does not require a hierarchy, and we can just assign directly the elements that we want to use as deformers for the mesh. So that's what we're going to do right now. So all you need is to select all your deformers and then select the mesh. Sorry, let's go into setup mode and bring up the bind tool. So here we use the method that we intend to use to deform the mesh, to assign the initial weights basically. And in this case, we're not going to use heat because the heat method does require a hierarchy. So we're going to use the smooth method by distance. And usually you have this bind as segments checkbox enabled. And what we're going to do is disable it. So this tells the system that instead of using a hierarchy and traverse that to determine which objects get weights assigned on weight maps on the mesh, it's just going to use the selection. So if I click on OK right now, you will see that all of our locators got some weight assigned onto them depending on the distance that it had as set by the tool. So that's all we needed to do. And now we have, let's go out of setup mode. We can grab one of the locators, move it around, and yeah, it's deforming properly. So now we can just go ahead and dynamically parent these guys onto their corresponding rider locator. So for example, in this case, I'm gonna go and select this guy and say add parent. Oh, I forgot to turn on compensation. There we go. And let's do the next one, which is this guy, and he's going to be dynamically parented to this other locator. Let's do him over to this guy. The next one, that's not the right locator, it's this one right here. Yeah, we want to make sure that we get the riders for the curve. Let's continue with this guy right here. Oops. No, that's not it. It's this one right there. And the last one is this guy. It's parented to this guy right here. And we're done. So now, if we test our rig, everything is working properly. So that's pretty much it. We're done with the binding. It's a great option to use when you don't really want to build a hierarchy for the mesh to use. Sorry. And we're ready to move on to a different part of our character. Before we move on, let's not forget to come here and let's rename this normalizing folder. Normalizing folder belt. And here we have our transforms for each belt deformer. Just to keep things as clean as possible over here. Now the question is, of course, why did we go through all the trouble to rig the belt this way if we could have just like assigned it to the deforming skeleton that the main character mesh was using right there, and then just copy the weight maps and just like we did it, for example, for the harness and some of the other accessories on the character. The reason is, well, the way we did it is not necessarily the best way in this case, because depending on the types of motions that this character needs to perform and the mesh we had over here, maybe just binding it that way would have been a much better solution. It would have been faster, it would have involved a lot less work, and it would have given just perfectly acceptable results. And in this case, this belt, it seems to me it's made of some kind of leather, maybe. So the leather can actually deform a bit as the character is moving. But the whole idea was just to look at another approach at getting this done that you could use in different situations when it's required. And this kind of rig is actually very useful when you have a piece of equipment such as this that needs to remain rigid and non-deformed at all times, but it also needs to follow the character as much as possible. So this particular belt, it's actually going to deform because it's anchored to the surface of the character. So the surface of the character is going to be deforming in different ways depending on what he's doing. But there are other ways of rigging it too, so that it doesn't deform following the mesh of the character. It just follows the motions. So that was the basic idea behind this exercise. It was just to give you another tool that you can keep in your tool set, another technique that you can use to rig different types of things depending on what you need to do with them. So again, I'm not saying this was the way to rig something like this for this character. I'm just giving you more options, and it's going to be up to you to decide with experience, of course, once you've been rigging some characters for a while, which is the right way to do particular piece of the character and how it's best to solve a given problem in a rig. So that's pretty much it. We're done with this guy, and we can continue with the rest of our character. Small detail. Before moving on, I forgot that there were some other accessories we haven't rigged, and these are pretty simple. They should be pretty fast to do. We forgot about the pouches and the belt buckle for the belt. So we have this belt buckle, and we have a number of pouches surrounding the belt. So let's do those very quickly. For the belt buckle, this is extremely simple. I'm just going to basically directly dynamically parent it onto my deforming locator right there, which is this one for the belt rig. So I'm just going to dynamically parent that, and that should take care of this guy. Let's test it out. Yeah, works fine. Sorry. Let's check out the first pouch over here, and let's see where this guy is. He's like right in between two locators right there, so I might have to create a little rig for him, and I'm gonna take care of that in a second. Let's check out the second one. Same for him. He's kind of close to this guy right here. I guess I could try to dynamically parent it to this deformer. Let's see. He's not going to look exactly attached to the belt at the right place, so I think I'm gonna leave him for later. Let's check. This one is kind of close. Him, I will definitely just attach him to this deformer right there. I mean, dynamically parent it. Sorry. So that means I can probably do the same for the pouch on the opposite side. Just dynamically parent it to this guy right here. There you go. Now for the other two, I'm going to have to let's just test out our setup here for a second. Yeah, it looks like it works fine for these two guys. Now for the other two, since they're more like in between, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create some of those attaching rigs on the belt, two per side, and I'm going to dynamically parent my pouches to those rigs. So for example, one could be on this edge right here, since that's where I think that pouch was. I'm gonna try to be as close as possible to its center right there. Let me hide the deforming skeleton again. So he's around there, around here somewhere. I think this edge would do. And then the first one, let's see where he is. He is around this edge too. That's as close as I'm gonna get. So I'm gonna do those little rigs and dynamically parent everything. Since you know how to do this, I'm not gonna keep you around. I'm just gonna come back as soon as I'm done with them. So I'll see you in a second. Okay, I'm done. So there they are, the pouches with their little rigs. Actually, let me hide them so you can just see them a little bit more clearly. We have these little rigs here. Sorry. This guy with its direction target and its up vector. And I finally attached them to polygons again on the belt. So everything is working. If we check out our character's movement, you can see that the pouches react with the belt buckle too. So now we're really done with this guy, and we can continue with the rest of the course. We're almost there, done with our character. So let's keep on going.